The City of Witches, Episode 10. Here comes Angelo Orwell, Ch.6. Anton Kafka was staring menacingly at Angelo, Giovanna, and Ursula. He was already imagining them as new additions in his fairy collection. Or maybe they would be the lucky ones who will become the test subject for the successful antidote. Kafka was excited about their trials, but first he would have to catch them. I have to admit, it's a nice surprise to get new guinea pigs so early, said Kafka. Normally I have to lure them in during the makeup exam seasons. Feels like Christmas coming early. Ursula rose from her knees and stood straight. She looked at Kafka with a murderous look. She felt no fear, and even if she did, it was suppressed by anger. "Why would you do this?" she said to Kafka. "All these kidnappings and forced fairy transformations, why would you do this?" Kafka let out a laugh. "Science! Progress!" he answered the question. "Think about what magic we can achieve if we find a way to incorporate the fairy realm ingredients in our practice, and I am only trying to find a way to achieve it." Ursula took out a small can from her pocket. "I admire your goals," she said, "but I also despise your methods. There are people who would willingly become test subjects. I am sure that if my sister knew about it when she was still not transformed, then she would volunteer. So why are you using random kidnapped people?" "There are more of them," said Kafka. "When you drive a car, you can't let it run out of fuel. It's that simple." Ursula couldn't stand it any longer. She took out a figure from her pocket. A man in a red trench coat and black leather pants, boots and sunglasses, holding a gun, a great representation of Dracula from Hellsong. Ursula covered it with the animating cream and started chanting the spell. "Through blood and earth and flowery seed, I give you life because I am in need. Stop, Kafka!" The cream became dust and Dracula pointed his gun at Kafka. He started firing a long series of bullets. He kept shooting and never reloading. After all, figurines don't have to reload their guns. The owner's imagination can give them just as many bullets as they need. Some bullets hit Kafka on his chest, some on his arms, others on his head. But they were not real bullets, so they couldn't harm him that much. Kafka knew the worst thing he had to worry about were bruises. Ursula tried finding a way to deal with him more effectively. She had an idea. Dracula is a vampire after all. Maybe if he managed to get close to him, he could use his teeth in the fight. Ursula placed the figurine on the floor. "Try melee," she said. Dracula was coming to Kafka, still continuing his barrage. Kafka reacted as quickly as he could. He took a vial of blue liquid out of his pocket and started chanting a spell. "Meine Feinde Pappen und sie entrappen." He threw the vial on the floor and its contents spilled around the room. A blue smile has appeared on the floor. Ursula folded around her legs, and then Giovanna, and then Angelo. Dracula was almost drowning in the slime. Ursula noticed that the figurine couldn't move any further to Kafka. Yet it still could shoot. She tried moving her own legs, but she just couldn't. She was feeling something holding her in place, like a puddle of glue. She deduced it must have been the slime. Nobody covered by the slime could move. Angelo loaded his crossbow and aimed at Kafka's legs. He pulled the trigger without hesitation. The blunt quarrel hit Kafka's knee, and he fell on the floor. Hissing from pain, Kafka tried to crawl out of the room. He realized he had already won. He just needed to fix the door and leave his guests stranded in his basement. Giovanna noticed his escape and tried stopping him. She took out a card from her pocket. This card was showing an old man holding a bunch of thorny vines. She aimed the card at Kafka and chanted the spell. "Mi lascia tenere che non posso raggiungere." The card flashed and shot out a vine just like those in the picture. It entwined around Kafka. He felt its thorns piercing his coat and skin. Giovanna pulled the cart behind her. The vine started pulling Kafka towards her, and straight into the slime. He knew that he was going to be stuck too if the slime reached him. He had to break free from this vine. His hand dived into his pocket. When it rose back, it was holding a pocket knife. With a few cuts, Kafka managed to free himself. The vine returned to the cart, and Giovanna felt defeated. "Quite an eventful day, I have to say," said Kafka, feeling triumph. "Maybe I'll reward you somehow for entertaining you are giving me. Maybe I'll be keeping you human until I have nobody else to try." And at this moment he felt a hit on his occiput, a blunt hit that made him hit the floor. Behind him there was Sarah. She just got there just on time. In her hand there was the bottom of the closet, which was broken from the hit. She was looking at Kafka's half-conscious body. "Holy shit!" Sarah exclaimed. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know I could hit this hard." "Sarah!" Ursula called her friend. "Guys, you're all in one piece." Sarah threw her improvised weapon and made a step towards Ursula. "No, don't come closer!" shouted Giovanna. Sarah stopped and looked on the floor. She could see at least half of it was covered in a blue slime. "One step in and you're stuck," said Giovanna. "We have to get rid of it somehow." "Maybe I look for an antidote," said Sarah. "That's a good idea," said Angelo. "Look through his pockets. He should have one." Sarah began looking through Kafka's pockets. He had many vials in them, each with a sticker, but none of them looked useful. Then she found a vial with 2 German words written on it. "Universelles Gegenmittel." "Angelo, can you see if that will work?" asked Sarah. "Yeah, sure, pass it to me, gals." Sarah gave the vial to Ursula, she gave it to Giovanna, and she gave it to Angelo. He could check its contents without making Sarah step in the puddle of slime. Angelo took his phone and ran a translating app. A quick search in German gave out the words "Universal Antidote." "Jackpot," said Angelo. He opened the vial and poured its contents onto the puddle. The slime turned to dust. Angelo tried jumping to see if it worked. He did it quite easily and landed with a loud crump. Ursula and Giovanna were delighted they could walk again, and Sarah was happy everything worked out well. "Aha! Before I forget," said Angelo, turning to the door on the back of the room. "It's safe now, you can come out." Sarah looked that way, trying to see what Angelo was shouting at, and when the door opened, a group of people came out. Sarah felt confused. Then she saw a wall full of jars similar to the one holding the ferry they were rescuing. She felt even more confused. "What's going on?" she asked. Angelo looked at Sarah and sighed. "Right," he said. "You weren't there with us when we discovered what he tried to do." Angelo took his phone. "I'll call Mr. Ovid to tell him the job is done," he said. "And I'll tell you everything on our way to the rendezvous point." "That's horrifying," said Sarah as she and her friends were re-entering Archangel Forest. "I've seen worse fates," said Angelo, "but nothing on this scale." "I think I will have to write a letter to Lily," said Ursula. "Maybe she can cheer me up." "Who's Lily?" Sarah asked about a newly heard name. "She's Ursula's sister," said Giovanna. "She's a fairy." Sarah froze from hearing this. After all she's heard about, she felt sorry for Ursula. "She's been transformed too?" she asked. "Yes," Ursula said. "My condolences," said Sarah. "My sincere condolences." "Do not say that, there is no need to," said Ursula. "Lily transformed into a fairy because she wanted to." Sarah sighed in relief. "Good to hear," she said. "No time to cry about nothing," said Angelo. "We're approaching the rendezvous point." Under the bush, near the road, there was a book. The same hardcover Hamlet as the day before. "Wonderful day to pick up some shroomies," Angelo said the passcode. The book opened, and the hiding fairy walked out. Did you find her? She said. Angelo took out the jar from under his coat. His client saw there was something inside. A young fairy. The eyes of the two fairies met. Leave, Kip! Mother shouted the name of her daughter. Oh, I can't thank you enough. Just doing my job, said Angelo. He opened the jar and let Livkip out. She ran to her mother and they happily embraced each other. They exchanged a lot of words in the language of fairies. Sarah noticed the strange speech they were using. Fairies have their own language? She asked, surprised. Angelo looked at her with a warm smile. It is true that you have a lot to learn, he said. Next day, when Ursula woke up, the sky was blue and cloudless, but she was still overwhelmed by emotions from the day before. She didn't want to go to school. She wanted to shut herself in her room and desensitize herself by playing Dread and Starvation. She loved this game, and it was brutal and vulgar enough to rebalance her. Pure catharsis, just like the ancient Greeks promoted. But of course she had to dress up and go to school. Usual Thursday, so Ursula walked to the kitchen and tried eating breakfast. She greeted her parents and sat at the table. Before her mom served breakfast, she had some news for her. Right, Ursula, you've got a letter. And she gave her an envelope. Ursula looked at the sender's name, and she was very happy when she saw their name was Lily. The day before, Ursula sent her own letter detailing what she experienced in Anton Kafka's laboratory. If it could even be called a laboratory. She was waiting for a reply impatiently. The fairy post gave her a nice surprise. Ursula opened the envelope and started reading. Dear sister, thank you for the letter. What you described was truly horrible. I can't imagine forcing transformations on such a scale. But there is a bright side to this. The fairy realm has some nice integration programs aimed at transformed people. I've heard some people get grasps of their new lives as soon as after a week. What's more, there is already research into transforming fairies back into humans. It will also help these born as fairies who try living as humans. Of course, all the trials are voluntary. I really hope this group turns out well. I'll try getting more info and writing to you. In the meantime, feel free to write anytime you want. Sincerely, Lily. Ursula smiled and hid the letter back in the envelope. It felt good knowing that the transformation might soon no longer be one way only. This letter let Ursula go to school without feeling depressed, but she still wanted to play Dread and Starvation after coming back home. Giovanna was slowly climbing Mount Corvus. She was carrying a heavy picnic basket. Inside, there were handmade bruschettas and stuffed onions. A picnic on Mount Corvus did indeed seem like a romantic idea for a date, no matter what happened there not long ago. When Giovanna arrived on the summit, there was already Angelo waiting, who greeted her with a smile. Looks like I finally arrived first, huh, Jovi? I love you too, said Giovanna. Angelo placed a blanket on the hill and took out 2 thermoses full of tea. Giovanna put her basket on the blanket and laid down. Angelo lay next to her. The couple was staring at the clouds and smiling. It feels so good to finally have no job to do, said Angelo. And it feels good to spend time with you without worries, said Giovanna. Maybe I'll finally get some rest. I hope so. On the other hand, I have only 4 missions left to do, and Mr. Ovid promised to send me on retirement after that. Angelo made a wide grin baring his teeth. I suppose he's telling the truth, said Giovanna. Genies are known for a code of honor. Well, if you say it, then I guess I can believe it, said Angelo, as he was opening his thermos. By the way, may I try your bruschettas, Jovi? Yes, of course, said Giovanna, reaching for her basket. Let's enjoy ourselves. As Sarah was coming home from school, she was reciting the mantra from Aunt Caitlin, and with every word escaping her mouth, she felt sparks jumping between her hands, more and more often. She was sure these sparks were her energy manifesting itself. That has to be just enough to finally start my training, she thought. When Sarah got home, she euphorically ran to the kitchen and looked for Aunt Caitlin. But Aunt Caitlin noticed her first. "Welcome home, my dearest niece," Aunt Caitlin said. "Hi," said Sarah. "Do you still have that wand thing you used to check my energy level?" "Of course. I never throw out things that aren't absolutely unusable." "Then can you test me again?" "Oh, do you think your energy has built up?" "Yes." Sarah couldn't be more sure of it. She was feeling sparks of energy more and more. She knew she had vast more energy than during her first testing. "Alright then," said Aunt Caitlin. "Wash your hands and I'll go find the wand." Aunt Caitlin went to her room and Sarah went to the bathroom. She washed her hands, feeling excited. When she went back to the living room, there was already Aunt Caitlin waiting with that slingshot-like wand. "So, just like the last time," said Aunt Caitlin. "Sit down and grab the wand by the double end." Sarah did just as Aunt Caitlin said. She sat on the chair and grabbed the wand. She visualized her energy traveling the wand. Aunt Caitlin was waiting to feel it. And there it was. It was very, very subtle, but Aunt Caitlin did feel some tickling on her palms. There was no doubt about it. Her niece has been training her energy, and it grew. "That's enough," said Aunt Caitlin. Sarah let go of the wand. "So, how was it?" she asked. Aunt Caitlin smiled. "I have felt your energy," she said. "It wasn't much, but I did feel it. If you train it enough, it will be really strong." "So, does that mean," Sarah said. "Yes, I believe you're ready to learn magic." Sarah was overjoyed. She was waiting impatiently for those words. She couldn't wait to start learning, and she knew she would do her best.